Hello, everyone, and welcome to the latest Thriving Talent LinkedIn Live. My name's Natalie Wilkins, and I'm the co-CEO of Thriving Talent. And today I'm joined by my amazing colleague, Eleanor.
Hi, thanks, Natalie. Yeah, my name's Eleanor. As you just said, I'm head of client accounts at Thriving Talent, and I also consult and facilitate on all things DEI. And looking forward to this conversation with Natalie, and to hopefully interesting conversation for you as well.
Absolutely. And today we're going to be looking at what people leaders need to know about psychological safety. And I'll let you in on a small secret. This is Eleanor's first LinkedIn Live. So please be very engaged and interactive with us today. Ask lots of questions because Eleanor is here ready to answer them. She's been deeply involved in this topic and the solutions that we offer to our clients on this. And she's ready to share what she knows and the experiences that she's been part of. So please be interactive. Share your questions with us. I could see earlier, Eleanor, that over 90 people had indicated interest to attend this LinkedIn Live. So there's no pressure on either of us.
This is us modeling how to create a safe space, by the way.
I know, right?
We're practicing psychological safety while talking about it, but I think that's the best way to introduce it, right?
Yeah. So we're going to make it safe for you to ask questions, our audience, and safe for us to answer them. So Eleanor, what have we got in store? What kind of questions do we want to explore on this topic?
Well, I think we should start with the basics, I suppose, and just go into very briefly, what is psychological safety and why is it important? Why are we here today to talk about it?
Yes. And I think this is a topic that we've seen become more and more popular in the space of diversity, equity, and inclusion over the last couple of years, especially this year. I've never seen as much content and speakers talking about this. And from our experience, I came across this term, it must have been 3 or 4 years ago, not earlier than that, when we were very busy helping companies to move along their diversity, equity, and inclusion journey. And with that, as you know, Eleanor, comes a lot of training to raise awareness and build skills around inclusive behaviors. And I tripped up on the term, I think, once on LinkedIn, and it was a blog article by the very well-known spokesperson and expert in this topic called Amy Edmondson. She has a really interesting background. She's researched on this topic since 20 years ago, and she speaks actively on it. She writes books, and she's run a lot of interesting research on it. And the way that Amy frames psychological safety is the way that people feel free to be able to speak up, ask questions, and offer ideas without any reprise, without any fear of how people will assume who they are, will judge them, without punishment. Mm-hmm. And when we think about how this fits into the context of diversity, equity, and inclusion, when you're trying to foster inclusive workplaces, not only do you want people to feel like they belong and that they can be themselves at work, but a lot of companies are investing in this because they realize the benefits this brings in terms of the culture around how teams perform together, around how teams can innovate. And psychological safety is really a foundational element to some of those inclusive behaviors in the workplace. So that's how I would define it. What's your view on this, Eleanor?
I think I really love the connection you made to diversity, equity, inclusion there as well, because that's fundamentally what we work on with a lot of our clients and talk about, right? And I think one message we always share there, and that a lot of us have been trying to share for many years. So, Natalie, and some of you watching might know that I wrote about diversity in work teams and the impact on team performance when I did my master's thesis many years ago. If I say, I'm not sure how safe I feel saying how long it was ago, because I'd have to think about how old I am already, but that's okay. There already it was a big topic that, diversity needs to be managed, and it can be leveraged. It can be leveraged for improved team performance. It can be leveraged for increased innovation, like a lot of the research shows, but it doesn't happen naturally. There has to be the right sort of culture and foundation for that. And psychological safety is that foundation, right? If people don't feel safe to bring themselves into the workplace in terms of their knowledge and their background and insights they want to share, then having a diverse workforce is not really that much of an asset as such. And the same with inclusion, right? So inclusion is only really achieved if you have that safe space where people can thrive and can contribute and can start feeling like they really, really belong.
Yeah. And so I think maybe if we take it one step further, make this practical. So, what are the leaders supposed to be thinking about and planning around in order to create this safe space for their teams, their diverse teams, hopefully, to thrive and collaborate effectively? Have you got any suggestions there, Eleanor?
Well, I suppose the question is, how would they get to this topic, right? Or why would they start as teams or as companies to think about this? And I think there are different situations where that can happen. It can be like we were just speaking about. You have a very mixed workforce. Maybe you're an international company, or maybe you're just a company that has different teams that need to be able to collaborate well together, and you want to make sure that you have that safe space to bring in those perspectives. So, and it can also be about making sure that you also keep those people in the company. So it can be if you have a danger of having high fluctuation or attrition, depending on your situation. So those could be a couple of situations, and maybe the one you mentioned or sort of mentioned already a little bit is also if you're thinking about innovation. So if you aspire to being a highly innovative company, if you're really interested in new ideas, moving things forward, change is happening, then that's really the moment to think about psychological safety as well. Absolutely. What about you, Natalie? What other moments could happen for companies or leaders where they would need to think about psychological safety?
Yeah, I think maybe if there's some concerning data or insights that the human resources partners are sharing with them, whether it's turnover, and you want to dig into why that might be. Why is there a higher amount of turnover? I was, example, reading a really interesting HBR article this morning about this. Microsoft did this huge work trend index survey with thousands of people, and it was interesting to see the link of their findings, their report, and how this links to psychological safety. Because what's happening is, as we're working in hybrid situations, we don't get to be with our colleagues day to day in person. So we're not getting a read on how they are, how they're feeling, how they might be coping as well with the work and with that tension with work and personal life. And so sometimes we miss cues on how they're feeling. And so what the report stated is that there's a lot of people resigning and leaving, and just feeling very fatigued and tired at work because they have a lot of tensions to manage, a lot more challenges at work than they've ever had before. And so having some safety to be able to flag that to your boss, or to be able to ask about it without feeling like you're judging or you're being too nosy into their personal life is really important, and I think is a really practical way of demonstrating and leading around psychological safety, so that you can get to the bottom of things sooner before people leave. Because when people feel disconnected to their job and they're not feeling connected to the purpose of their job, or they're not coping and they're too afraid to raise their hand and ask for help, then you don't know why people are choosing to leave. And so I think that those signals could be a way to start being a little bit more curious and showing some care and attention to people to understand how they're feeling at work, right?
Yeah, I think, like you were just saying, employee surveys are a good source as well, right? To look at what or feel the temperature a little bit. Questions around trust, questions around do I feel I can contribute? Do I feel I can innovate? Ask questions, things like that can give an indication of where you're at with psychological safety. And I think some of the work we do, and also some of our clients do, in some of the workshops around creating inclusion, we like to use negative brainstorming as one of the tools, and results that come out of exercises and conversations like that can also show first indications that maybe it's a topic we need to work on. But so thinking about that, if a company does start working on psychological safety, what is it that what are the signs that, well, let's look at the positive signs first. What is it that they're looking for? What would they look like if it was a psychologically safe place to work?
Well, I think the benchmarks for that, I'd like to think are reflected in our own team, in our own company, because I know we try to role model this and practice this. So it would be, are we asking difficult questions or challenging and sharing challenging feedback, obviously with the purpose and the aim of improving what we do and serving our clients in the best way, right? Not to hurt our colleagues or to be negative for the sake of being negative, but are we creating that constructive discourse and dialogue in our team? Do you see people ask questions, pertinent questions? Do you see people saying, actually, I'm not sure about this, I think there's a flaw here and this is why, and maybe we could try this instead, or we could do this to make it better? Do you hear those comments and questions in your team meetings? If you do, then I think people are feeling safe to speak up, right? Another example, which I think relates to very closely to a project you're involved in at the moment, Eleanor, is around speaking up around inappropriate behavior and how safe people feel around that. So, for example, if there's a colleague who continually talks over someone in a meeting, or other people in general in a meeting, or if someone said something that was really rude or inappropriate, how is the team handling that? Are they acting as bystanders or allies? Are they speaking up or giving that person feedback privately to reduce those situations from happening? I think if you're doing that and you're seeing that in a team and you're holding each other accountable, that's another positive sign.
Yeah. And I think one of my favorite ones, which I think we're also really good at as a team, is how you deal with mistakes, right? So also, when mistakes happen, how do you react to that? How do you have a conversation about that? And how do you move forward from that situation? And also, is it okay to own up to mistakes? So, I'm always happy in our team meetings when people say, oh, actually, I forgot to do that, or actually, something went not quite up to plan, because it's nice that they can just share it, right? For us, it's a great sign that they can speak up and just say if they didn't do something, or something didn't go as planned, or whatever it is that would maybe be considered a mistake or a failure. But it's not necessarily a mistake or a failure. We're all human as well. And we can just move on from that and have a conversation and learn and move on. And the second important kind of link to that is, I suppose, kind of and I think we're really great at that as well, is there's no question too small, if you like. So, to always continue asking questions if you don't understand, if you're curious, if you want to know more, whatever your motivation is, and whether it's small things or larger, more existential questions. There's no question too small. Every question is welcome. And
those are great examples, Eleanor. That they're great. And I think when you can see those positive signals or examples, what you've described or I described earlier, then I think you'll have a sense that this is a fairly safe environment for the work to take place, for the team to show up and do their best work together. You talked about, well, what's the negative? You asked the question. We started with the positive. The negative would be, the red flags would be, obviously, if none of that is happening, that's a red flag. That's right. Or if people are brushing mistakes under the carpet and ignoring them and not talking about them and not trying to learn from them so that they can be avoided next time, that's a huge red flag, especially when you work in the medical sector. There's lives at risks when this type of culture is festering in the workplace. It really does boil down to life and death. So, companies and organizations really need to avoid taking these big risks or making these big mistakes, and paying attention to that is important. Is there any other negative signals or red flags that you can think
I
about?
think what's always a bit suspicious for me is when teams or companies say we work very easily together and decisions are very comfortable and very easy, because actually psychological safety is not about comfort. So I think in all the work we do, and I often say this at the beginning of workshops, especially around inclusion and diversity, is it's not going to be comfortable. we do try and have a bit of fun and good conversations, but it's not going to be comfortable. And the same very much applies to psychological safety, right? It's not about comfort. It's not about easy conversations all the time and getting on well, and we're friends and buddies and we make decisions easily. There I would have the question, are you truly bringing in your full views, and are you bringing in the more difficult questions? So I think for me a red flag is kind of, in a sense, a red flag is if it's too easy or too comfortable. Or put differently, it's if people aren't speaking up and people aren't asking the more uncomfortable questions, if they're not raising their hands in meetings, if they're not willing to challenge processes or decisions or opinions. That probably a large flag for me.
And I think my observation from the cultural elements that can work against fostering this psychological safety often is the culture of maybe the country or the region that you're based in. As we know, in certain parts of Europe, it can be very hierarchical and power driven, and that creates situations such as fear of failing or not questioning superiors because of how that might look, and assumptions and impressions that might create when you do that. And also I find with the hierarchical cultures, or even the cultures which are very avoidant of any kind of conflict, and we live in Switzerland, and as we know, the Swiss really like to keep things peaceful and easy, and giving or receiving what might seem as difficult or challenging feedback or questions tends to be avoided. It's skirted around, and I think when you have those elements in the mix, that can make it more challenging. And I think that's why it's even more so important for the team to have conversations about this, and to have some agreements and principles on how to create psychological safety, like you said, for the benefit of the team and the work you do together.
Absolutely. So if we sort of, we've said that we've shared a lot of examples now, situations that could happen. So when is the moment to start working on this? Or how would someone watching this thinking, maybe I recognize some of those red flags, how would they recognize that there's work to be done in their organization or in their team? Or...
Well, I think if they do recognize that there's work to be done, that there's some red flags, there's a few different ways they can approach this. There's a great tool that the Fearless organization designed called the organizational or the Fearless organization scan, which, for example, at Thriving Talent, we're certified to be able to use that and offer that to clients. And that's not a very expensive tool. It's a very short survey. It's 6 questions. It takes 5 minutes, 10 minutes max to complete. And so a leader might want to take that to the team and introduce the topic. That can be done through a lunch and learn, through a workshop, just to get people familiar with the concept, the importance it plays in a team, and the different facets of it. And that might help people feel comfortable to want to enter into an honest conversation about that within the team. And then the scan is an anonymized way of getting those different perspectives on how psychological safety is experienced inside of that context of the team. And then that can be debriefed, and that can be debriefed with maybe a very experienced facilitator or coach internally within the company, and we can help them prepare for that debrief, or they can hire us to do that. It's not this work and taking this topic to the team, you could end it at a lunch and learn, and everyone will go away thinking, oh, I know what psychological safety means, and I have some ideas of how to read and measure that in my team. But you want to take it that one step further, and that's, I think, where it is more of a stretch out of your comfort zone as a leader and as a team, especially if you're not practicing this, because you are going into that territory where people can be really candid and honest with each other, and that is uncomfortable, and that's okay, right? Because we're built to do hard things. We can do this. We just don't always give ourselves permission to do it. And I think when a team gives that opportunity to itself to do it, some really beautiful things can come out of it. You can correct misunderstandings. You can get a better sense of what people expect from you and from one another. And you can have very constructive conversations about how to improve certain things so that you can go back to work and perform better together.
Yeah, and I think a huge advantage of doing the scan is if you have a feeling as a team leader or within an organization, maybe I recognize some of those red flags, but I don't know exactly where it comes from, or maybe, I'm interpreting it from my role, but other people see it differently. The scan really gives an opportunity to have that conversation. So it's very much about that, right? It gives you a structure for that conversation. So rather than just going into a team meeting and saying, I think I've seen something's not quite right, and, maybe having a slightly more free-flowing, but then also maybe slightly awkward conversation, the scan gives you a framework to have that conversation with him. So it's still a very open conversation, but everyone has completed the scan, everyone has reflected on the same questions, and it gives you that structure to take those questions and to take the results and to dive deeper into that and to try and get a greater understanding. And I think from there, then things emerge, right? Of, okay, where does the lack of psychological safety come from in this specific context? Because it's not the same for every team. Some team might have an okay culture about asking questions, but maybe not so much about owning up to mistakes or supporting each other through harder times. Other ones, the opposite. So, it's finding out a little bit in more detail, okay, what does psychological safety mean to us as a team, and where are we already strong, and where do we have room for improvement? And then taking it from there in terms of them more developing ideas for how that can change. That's a very specific to the team. So I think that's really important thing to remember is, as with most of the work we do, is in the end it has to be relevant and apply for that context that you're looking at it.
You can't run this scan with more than 50 people. It's limited as to the group size that you can go with. So it works well, I think, for smaller businesses or departments, and then the teams within that department, or just within some of the teams in the department. You can't really measure psychological safety across the organization because it's the whole thing's going to be averaged out, and then you won't really know where the hotspots exist within that bigger organizational sphere. So it's important to often clients ask, well, how would you start? I would start at the top and cascade down, because you really need to have a strong psychological safety with your top leadership. If they're not feeling safe with one another to do their best work, that really does cascade and infects the rest of the organization in a big way. It sets the tone of how are they behaving with each other, how safe do they feel, and then it sets the tone for the rest. So starting at the top, cascading down is the best way.
The ideal way, and at the same time, aware that people watching, there might be sort of team leaders who have, also it's that time of year where people are doing more sort of team events and kind of closing the year. And it is a great thing as well to do within your team, even if the organization is not yet focused on it, maybe, not to say that it doesn't have a culture of that, but it is also a good conversation to have with the team. Then, of course, at the beginning, it's important then to set the frame of saying this is something we're doing for our team, and it's maybe not yet multiplied into the wider organization, but then also interesting to have that conversation about how can we as a team, in a more bottom-up approach, also influence some of the stakeholders and teams around us with the way we've decided to move forward.
I love the bottom-up approach, because you can then directly influence that sphere of control that you have. And at the end of the day, Eleanor, both you and I are team leaders of teams, and and we care about our results, and we care about how our teams perform and feel at work. And so that's the very least we can do is to take charge of that and influence that for the better. So I highly recommend the bottom-up approach as well too.
So Natalie, just to kind of looking at time, just to sort of think about towards the end of this conversation. So more specifically, you spoke a little bit about, we're certified also to run the scan, but what is it that we as Thriving Talent do to support organizations on their journey towards more psychological safety?
Oh, well, I think we mentioned a couple of solutions already. I think, you've got the scan and you can get some support to design and set up the debrief from Thriving Talent. You could even hire us to run some lunch and learns with the team to get them familiar with the topic. We also have a leaders toolkit workshop if you want to equip some leaders on some specific tools to practice with the team that improve psychological safety. Or you can hire us to do a team development journey where we will take the lead on briefing the team, running the scan, debriefing with the team, and then following up from there. So it's a good range that we offer. And I'm also conscious, Eleanor, that our invitation for questions worked. And we've got some comments and questions. Great. And I'm just very, very quickly scanning. There's some familiar faces I see, which is lovely. And I'm just quickly scanning to see if we have any comments. I know your colleague Simon has been very active in responding to the comments. Thank you, Simon, for doing that. And there's been some sharing of articles.
Oh, good. I look forward to seeing.
That's really great. But I don't see any specific questions.
Oh, well, the invitation still stands, I suppose, if someone does have a question for us too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And also, if you want to learn more about some of the examples and the red flags and the connection to diversity, equity, and inclusion, do check out our website. We have a webpage dedicated to psychological safety. And in there, you can find links to blogs and to some articles, as well as to the brochure of solutions that we have. But I don't think there's any questions from what I can see that we need to address. So
well, people are a little bit like me and sometimes need a moment to digest all of the information, and then, the questions come up afterwards, right?
They do.
That's actually the way it is for me, not quite in the moment, but when I've digested a little bit. But I think, well, you know how to reach us now, certainly over LinkedIn or over the website, or if you have our email addresses or telephone numbers, whatever you can find to reach out to us. Just let us know if you have questions that maybe come up when you're digesting this, or if you think you've heard a lot but you're maybe still not sure where to start and what the right way is to approach it. Then we're always happy to have those conversations.
Absolutely. Oh, I can see a question, Eleanor. Let me read it out. It's a great question. What about when there is safety, but no action is taken on the feedback? Does that mean that there is no safety because you don't feel taken seriously?
So the safety for people to speak up and share feedback, but then nothing happens with the feedback.
Yeah.
That's a really good question. We could almost do a session only on that kind of topic. I think the first thing I would say is, firstly, obviously, it's good that there is that safety. So that's come from somewhere, right? So that there is that safety to speak up and to contribute and to give the feedback and to bring in ideas. And then I think maybe it's a next level of safety to have the conversation about what happens with that feedback and those ideas. Because truth is, and we know that, as you said as well, as team leaders before, Natalie, we sometimes have to decide what do we do with ideas, right? And not all of them reaction and not all at the same time. But I think the important thing is having that conversation. So I don't think I'd say it's a decision of is there safety, is there not safety, but maybe there's safety on certain aspects of bringing in feedback, but maybe not the safety yet to have that open conversation about, okay, what happens with the feedback and when can we action it and when can't we, so being transparent about that as a team and leaders, I think, is very important.
Absolutely. Yeah. It's really about accountability, which I think is a next layer up is, how do you recognize the contribution and the feedback so that people feel encouraged to do it again? And then looping back with an outcome or a decision around the feedback so that people feel like it was dealt with and it was taken seriously. And like you said, I don't think that's an indicator that there's no safety. It's an indicator that there's not enough feedback and communication happening in the team. And I think that's a fundamental best practice as a leader, at the very least, so that you can keep encouraging your team to contribute and raise their hand and speak up. So we have recorded this session. So our lovely colleague Jana, who is managing all of the tech side of things, is going to get this on our website, and recording will be shared. So if you'd like to reach out for that recording specifically, do feel free to get in touch with Eleanor, myself. We'll probably promote it on the LinkedIn company channel too. So I'd like to thank you, Eleanor, for being here today and taking part in this LinkedIn Live. I hope this gives you a taste for more to come, and we'll have you
ready now.
Yourself.
I'm sure we have lots more interesting conversations coming up. So thanks for having me. And
absolutely. And I know a few of our clients were here live. So the invitation's out to you as well. If you'd like to be hosted by Eleanor or one of the team on a LinkedIn Live to share something about what you've learned and what you've applied in the space of diversity, equity, and inclusion, then feel free to let us know, and we'll be happy to design and host that with you in the coming months. So we wish everyone a beautiful rest of the day. Thank you for coming along, and we'll see you next time.
See you soon, hopefully. Bye everyone.